Brad, Bizjack, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
I'm so excited to be here, Ken. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Of course, Brad and I were just getting caught up. We figured out that our paths first crossed a little over 5 years ago, and Brad's been on this. I mean, you were on fire then. I felt like you had a real vision in your eye, like you were. We met in the Tony Robbins environment at a youth summit. That's really, really cool, and I don't know. I mean, we're in an environment where there's a lot of bright lights. There's a lot of people with a lot of energy. There's a lot of people kind of going places. And then even in that environment, I felt like you were just super motivated and kind of a standout. But now I don't know. You know how like sometimes you go buy a car and you're like, I think nobody has this car. And then you see it everywhere. What do they call that? Like your reticular activating system. Right.
Yep.
So I think my reticular activating system then got on the Bizjack train and I was like, started seeing you in different places, right? Your podcast, online programs. So Matt, I'd love I want to know personally more about your story because even though we're friends, we don't know each other that well.
Yeah.
And I don't know your whole backstory that well. So maybe start me in your personal development journey wherever you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting how we start on a journey for one reason, and we start because we want something, but then we end up getting what we needed along the journey. And I think that's true in every context. Well, I started the personal development journey really started back when I graduated college, and I was deeply in debt, $92,000, and I had got a job that I did not like at all, right? And it was just a toxic environment, and it wasn't for me. And at that stage in my life, I had a lot of limiting beliefs going on. Things like I'm not enough, things like I'm not worthy of success. Money is bad. Once you have it, it disappears. And if you don't have a lot of it, you can't be happy. And so I was $92,000 in debt back then. And I thought that more money would change my life, right? I thought having a greater income, paying off this debt, that would be the thing that made me happy. And so I found online business, and that was the ticket, right? I saw all these stories of possibility and influence and all this stuff, and I wanted it so bad. I wanted to be debt-free. I wanted to have this choice. But if I'm being totally honest, what I really wanted at that stage of my life was to be the breaking point of mediocrity in my family history. I wanted to outrun my past. I wanted something where I could sprint towards something instead of moving away from something. And so business for me was how I did that. That was my vehicle. When I didn't realize at the time that letting go of these holds of the past and coming to terms with them and thanking them was really one of the greatest keys. I had this determination to outrun it. And so I got started in the network marketing space. I was selling fitness programs for a number of years. And everything I tried didn't seem to work, right? I would do all the right things on paper. I would show up, do exactly what my mentors told me, and it wasn't happening. And I would see other people's success, and I would take it to mean that it was my failure because I wasn't at that level. And I would start to get in my head, am I just not destined to succeed? Is it not in the cards for me? It's easier for him. It's easier for her. What am I missing? And my mentor at the time told me, like, dude, you need to do work on your mind because what you're doing right now, it's not working. You need to hire a coach to work on rewiring your mind. And I'm like, but I'm $92,000 in debt. I can't afford to hire a coach. And she said, Brad, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I hired a coach. This is back in 2016, hired a coach. And on our very first call, she said something that transformed my life forever. I was telling her how I want this so bad. I'm doing all the right things. I'm listening to the podcast. I'm reading the books. It's not happening for me. It's happening for everyone else. And she said, Brad, you're so attached to success that you're missing the whole point. Right. You're under the impression that you shouldn't be where you are right now. Business, success, and money isn't going to make you more happy. It's rewiring your mind to be happy that will lead to success. And I was resenting everything. I was resenting all of these experiences around me that were shaping me. And right about then is when I started this whole journey of rewiring my mind and shifting my beliefs. We met in the Tony Robbins ecosystem, right? I would volunteer at events like that and go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. When she said that, because here you are like type A, you're a young guy, you're like, I'm just going to get out there and grind it out and kick it. And, it's not working though, right? And what she said, depending on I'm thinking of myself, like if I would have heard that in my 20s, like, I think I might have just been like, that just sounds like a bunch of wishy-washy, magic dust or whatever, right? Like, did it hit right away? Did what she was saying make sense? Were you able to digest that right away, or how did it come in?
Well, it did hit right away. And I
Okay.
think the only reason it did is because I had received enough pain
Yeah.
in things not working for years. It had been 5 years of trying business and failing and never earning more than $35,000 a year doing
So
what I was
pride and
doing.
ego were not like sky high to where you weren't super
Exactly.
into resistance. You didn't have all the answers at that point.
Exactly. I was
Got it.
like, I have to do something different.
Yeah.
It's not working. Right. So I was very open to it. And so uh, it required me looking internally to change some things. And it was very, very uncomfortable, but I had to do it. Um, but that changed everything because I
Yeah.
would start looking at these circumstances in my life that I had blamed for so long as the reason why I was where I was. And instead of blaming them, I started thanking them. And instead of resisting them, I started accepting them. I started asking myself, what can I appreciate about the situation? Our mutual mentor, Tony,
Mm-hmm.
right? He says all the time, this is my favorite quote of all time. When you trade your expectations for appreciations, your whole life changes in an instant.
Yep.
And so I started doing that, and my whole life turned around over the next couple of years. And I started to find that sharing these concepts with other people really lit me up. And I would go and speak on calls or help someone one-on-one with these concepts that were changing my life. And I started to realize that I had a gift for it. And I started helping people in that regard. And we ended up creating courses and programs and coachings. And now it's this big thing that's impacted tens of thousands of lives all over the world. But it started with me shifting the inner game and rewiring my mind first. So that's like a 10-year, 11-year snapshot in a very short period of time. But that's kind of how the journey went.
So you knew at a certain point that, okay, this is working on me, and now it's actually something that I can passionately do and help others and make a living at it. Yeah. What year was that kind of transformation, or?
2016, I was at a Brendan Burchard event, and he asked the question from stage, how would it look if you were to do it your own way? And I was in the network marketing space at the time, and I just had this moment where and this is the same time I'm going through this coaching and all this stuff, and I had some immersion with my coach and gone through this transformation already. And in that moment, I would teach people how to be happy. And it ended up evolving into rewiring their mind for success down the road. But I just realized in 2016 that was where I was meant to take things. I had this ability to be able to work with someone, and they could tell me a challenge they were facing, but I'd be able to see what they were actually saying behind the challenge and be able to work with them on the root. And when you change the root, you get a different fruit. And so that's really what I got to work on. And that's what I've made, the last 7 years about. And it's been so transformative. And I realized one thing too, I utilized, and I think a lot of people hold themselves back from going after what they really want because they don't feel qualified. Well, when you teach something to other people, you relearn it yourself.
Sure.
And so I utilize this process of building a business as a way to teach me the concepts that I was teaching other people. And that's how I really learned it over time. So instead of postponing until I was ready or certified or already fully transformed, like I think a lot of people do, instead, what I did is I said, this is a great opportunity to serve. And in the process, I can learn as well.
No, that's very cool. And did you feel like, so it's 2016, you haven't made money yet. You haven't, so your old version of what the North Star was, maybe, money, success, that type of success, material success. Now you're learning some things. It's 2016. You're getting woken up by your coach. You're getting worked up by, Tony, Brendan, whoever else you're intaking at that point. The monetary success isn't there yet. Had you already though learned that, hey, this is an inside job, and I think I flipped the switch. I mean, like yeah.
Yeah, it was at that moment that I realized my success is inevitable. I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And the longer I resent not being there, saying I should be further along than I am right now, or I'll be happy when I make X amount of money, that's no longer serving me. That's putting me in a lower state. And when I'm in a lower state, I don't do great quality work. I don't show up as the best version of myself. So I needed to trust and believe that I was on the right path. And from doing that, and from finding, one of the craziest things that happened is this whole process of getting out of debt. I remember we started this journey of paying it off back, when we graduated school. And so I'm 34 at the time we're recording this. And so we graduated school, we were 21, 22. And for 7, 8 years, we hadn't made any progress, 7 years, whatever it was. And it was right around 2017, 2018. And it was after this decision of, okay, we're on the right track, but every single payment we made towards this student loan debt didn't seem to make a dent. And I remember my wife, Janice, being so frustrated one day on her way to work. And she was like, how are we ever going to get out of this? And I just said to her, I was like, babe, we need to learn how to appreciate this and celebrate this, or we're going to be miserable for years. And so I really noticed these changes started to happen when I would celebrate being in debt, when I was grateful for
Talk to
being.
me about the inner dialogue about being grateful for the debt. What does that talk?
Well, at first you think, how can I be grateful for debt? It's holding me
Sure.
back from everything that I really want in my life. But I was like, wait a minute, this is bringing me closer together with my wife.
Mhm.
It's a journey we're on together. When I accomplish this, like, I'll be able to look back and learn and have all these amazing lessons that I've, accumulated through that process. I'll be able to serve other people with this. And if I take a look at the best friends that I have in my life, and the getting the job that I disliked, that led me to online business, none of that would have been possible without my investment in going to this university where I acquired this debt. And so I started looking at it through the lens of what gifts came out of pain.
Sure.
And when I started looking at it from that perspective, all of a sudden it was no longer a bad thing. But then what's crazy is, once I started appreciating the debt and celebrating it, all of a sudden something crazy happened. My business started to grow. I started to notice that I wasn't really changing my marketing very much. I would just start attracting these opportunities. And it was out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, within about a year, we paid off all of that debt, and it changed our whole
Wow.
lives. But it started from appreciating the situation we were in instead of expecting that situation to be different.
I think it's I remember at the beginning of that wealth mastery course, I think one of the first things is, I forget the exact quote, but some of the effect of, the first step in achieving wealth mastery is realizing that you're already there. And, when 98% of our country is doing better than the rest of the world, no matter where you are in our country, no matter where you sit in the socioeconomic ladder, you're doing better than 98% of the world's population. And that's, but we take it for granted a lot, right? And then I think there's an energetic, you've certainly experienced it, I've experienced, but there's, you know, I, and I swear the old me would have just smacked me for saying what I'm about to say right now. But I believe, like, everything's a co-creation. I do believe that the universe is conspiring in our favor normally, but we do things to slow it down, prevent it, block it, whatever. And all of the negative beliefs, I'm not good enough, the worry, the focus on the problem instead of the solution, or of the pain instead of the gratitude. It's all just a blocker that prevents the universe from showing up the way it should, I feel like.
Absolutely. I'm going to share a definition that I learned from one of my mentors, James Wedmore. We hear the word manifestation thrown around in the personal development space all the time, right?
Yeah.
Manifest this, manifest that. Well, manifestation is the physical representation of your consistently dominant vibration.
Okay.
And so if what most people do is they'll have, a practice where they practice gratitude or something for 5 minutes in the morning, but then they're pissed off and frustrated for 23 hours and 55 minutes the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And so they end up wondering why their gratitude practice isn't working or whatever. Well, this is an example of exactly what you're saying, where we get in the way of the universe serving us because we start thinking that it should be different. We lower our energy, and so we attract this lower energy stuff into our life. When if you can live your day to day in a place of abundance, a place of vibrancy, vitality, that's where all of the really cool stuff starts to happen. Not only from a people want to be around you perspective, but your energy is higher. And when your energy is higher, your creativity is higher. And when your creativity is higher, you take more productive action. And that's what yields different results in your life. And so all of that to say, if you just align with the universe conspiring for you, all of a sudden life gets a heck of a lot easier.
I love that. I feel so strongly about, this particular part of what we're talking about, because it's, it also comes back to our brain's desires to want to be correct, right? That no matter what bad thought is or good thought is in our head, our brain wants to be right. And so I think that repetition of it's not going to work, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. The brain is just like, it's like an I told you so, mechanism built in, right? It's like, see, told you, you shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have bought that car. You shouldn't have done that thing. You shouldn't have started that business. We knew there'd be pain. Now there's pain. And it's just the way I told you. But I think it also conspires, again, from a creativity standpoint. It thinks the North Star is now this nice goal.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's starting to look for, again, reticular activation system, like, what evidence does it have now of that being true? And I literally think we can talk ourselves or wire ourselves into these different things, not in the same sense as, oh God, why am I not thinking? What's the book where you just wish for it all and it shows up?
Oh, The Secret?
The Secret.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
but I think they're onto something great there. Obviously, not that they need my opinion. I think they sold plenty of books, but I think the problem that me and some other people had with that is it action was not necessarily part of that, right? It was sort of like just manifest it, and I'm like, no, manifest it, think about it, really envision it, and take massive and direct action to make it happen. Quick story for you, Brad. So this is a weird one because I didn't realize it until kind of after the fact, but I mentioned to you pre-show that we moved into New York at the beginning of the pandemic because that's just what we do, right? We're going against the grain while everyone's moving out. Our adult kids were out here. We wanted to be near them. It was a time to slow down and be near family. And so we did that and we got out here and we liked living in the city. It was kind of cool and certainly liked being near our kids, but also started going, okay, if we're going to stay out here on the East Coast, what do we want? And at some point I was in a coaching program and they had us doing kind of a manifestation board or whatever, vision board, And on that vision board, I put a bunch of stuff. And one of the things that I put on the board was this really, really big house in New Jersey that my wife had, I think sent me a link on like Zillow or something. Not even like we should buy it. It was more like, isn't this cool? By then my language was changed quite a bit into, I wouldn't say things to myself like, I can't afford that. I might just say something like, not yet, right? Which has a much different implication than, you know what I mean? Not yet is like, oh, that's happening, but not yet. About 8 months later, we're out looking at houses. Now it was time to buy about 8 months later. I literally had forgotten about the vision board. I didn't use it. It all worked out well, but I didn't use the vision board where it was like my desktop screensaver where I did the exercise and I kind of forgot about it. It's in my photos somewhere now. And I was at a mastermind this summer and I realized that last winter we closed on a house that did not look like the one that she sent me at all. But subconsciously, between she and I, we turned it into that vision without even having that vision in mind anymore. Do you know what I mean? Or at least it was in our subconscious, but not, and I went back because I was at a seminar where we were talking about vision boards and I was like, ding, like, what a reminder. Like, a year ago, I think I thought about this place and I compared the pictures and they were very close. They were very, very close. In fact, I showed them to someone at the seminar and she thought the dream house was our house. She had seen our pictures of our house before. It was just wild.
What's amazing? I have to share a story with you that's
Please.
almost identical.
Cool.
Because it just shows exactly how when you visualize and then you take action, it changes everything. That is such a cool story because it shows how powerful your subconscious mind is, and it aligns with what your deepest desires are. We lived in Michigan for a while, and I remember being at a friend's lake house, right? And we were sitting there in, their hot tub overlooking the lake. And this is, 2 years ago or something like that. And Janice, my wife, and I look at each other and be like, how cool would this be? How cool would it be to do something like this? And it was like, we kind of imagined what that would be like to, pull out of a dock and look up this hill at this beautiful home and all this stuff. And we kind of just went on our merry way, like as a not yet, like that's something that would be amazing, not yet.
Yeah.
And about a year later, we were like, okay, because we were renting in Chicago. We moved to Chicago, we were renting. And we were talking about moving and buying in the suburbs of Chicago. because we thought that, it was great schools, all that stuff. And my buddies challenged me and they were like, hey, like, take a look at what your heart really wants. Where do you really want to be?
Mm-hmm.
What's crazy is that day we got a listing sent to us from a friend for this house. And it ended up we ended up closing a month later and all this
Wow.
crazy stuff. We ended up with this beautiful, beautiful place. And then I didn't even think about it. And then the next summer came by, right? Because we bought, when it was cold, and the next summer came by and we were pulling out of the dock and I looked up the hill
And that was the vision, right?
and it was,
Yeah.
and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, that's so cool.
So very similar experience. Just shows how powerful our subconscious mind is. And
No, it's crazy. And that's without either one of us beating it into our head every day. It was more like just planting it and not denying it. That's a big part of it because I think people get so used to how we use our words, especially on ourselves, is so critical, I think, right? And so old me might have said, we can't do that. It's too expensive. Had that been the language, it never would have happened, right? Because you're just shut off. No, it's not happening. It's out of the question. It's not happening. Instead of going, not yet. Today's not the day for that. There will be a day for that if that's what we choose to have, but today's not the day. And I think that's an entirely different way to bring things in.
yeah, you're accepting of it. You know that it will happen. It's positive anticipation and it's not denying what your heart really wants. I think then here comes the component of, am I worthy of these goals? Is this possible for me? And all that stuff that people think about. And if you just say, one of my mentors, I forgot who said this, said, God's delays are not God's denials unless you give up.
Yeah.
And if you just allow for it to be not yet, but absolutely, then all of a sudden you'll wake up and life's just radically different. As long as you align your energy and action with the very best version of yourself, you'll attract and bring into your life the things that you've always wanted.
Well, that also comes back to this whole idea, I think, that everything at a minimum is a co-creation between you and the universe. So you don't get to control all of it, right?
Yep.
You get to take the actions you want to take, and then things are going to show up when they're going to show up. And, that's okay. I mean, I think that's part of growing too, is I think learning that. So tell me, in the business part of this, when you got started, what did you do first? Did you start coaching people? Did you sell? I know you have online programs. Like what was the first sort of way that you went after supporting yourself?
So when I first started off this journey, it was all about, I built an online course, but it wasn't selling. I had no idea how to market, no idea how to sell.
What was the course?
The course was called, Appreciation Academy.
Okay, cool.
And it was all about this idea that when you learn how to appreciate your existing circumstances, that's when you get to create new circumstances. We've rebranded and all that stuff since then. But that was what the course was focused on. And I was having a lot of trouble getting it off the ground. And so what I would do is actually start coaching people one-on-one and building up a book of business that way. And then towards the end of the coaching relationship, make the offer to present to their communities. These are all business owners that I would work with. Present to their communities to share some nuggets and then make an offer of my program at the end. And long story short, over the course of years and months and months and months of trial and error and failing to launch this thing, finally we got one right and it finally started to grow. And then over the course of time, the one-on-one business just took up so much time that I had to, and the course business was selling, that I had to flip-flop those and I had to make a more scalable offering and focus on that. And so that's when it kind of started to shift and it went into more online courses. And now it's just built to where now we have our online course, we have our high-level group coaching programs, and just kind of expanded from there. But we ran into a lot of issues with the marketing of it before. And we can go that direction if we want to, because I can talk about that all day long, but it was a big challenge.
Well, what'd you learn from it, I guess? I mean, I think that's a tricky look. You seem to have, and always have seemed to have tons of energy to me. By then you already had, I'm sure, a very resilient mindset for the situation, because a lot of people would have been freaking out like, I need money, right? And so you're coming at it with a good mindset. You're reapproaching it. I think a lot of people that build funnels and market products, it's like just follow our 7 easy steps and like you're good to go. And it's not quite that easy, right? So, what are some of the biggest lessons that you took from the early launch days?
That's a great question. I would say the biggest lesson that I learned was actually about how there is two big ones that come to mind. There is no such thing as a bad launch. And number two is price is marketing. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So in the beginning, I remember creating this webinar for this program and being so excited to sell it. And I would talk to my wife and be like, I'm so excited. This is going to change our lives. It's going to change our financial situation. We're going to do $20,000 in sales from this webinar. And I would pack up a 200-foot Ethernet cord and go over to my friend Amanda's house because she had the good internet, right?
Yeah.
And I would trail it from the router up to the top level. And I deliver this presentation. I spent, $5,000 on Facebook ads that I didn't have. And we had 558 people register for this webinar. We had 18 people show up and one person bought, and it was a friend that felt sorry for me. And that was back when the program was priced at $279. And so I had lost $4,700, felt the disappointment. But I remember what my mentors told me, there's no such thing as a bad launch. And so I took everything to the whiteboards and I was just like, okay, what worked, what didn't work? And I just kept on mapping it out. I did another webinar, and this time we spent $3,000 in ads that we didn't have. And then we had 12 people show up and 0 people buy. And this happened month after month after month, until one day I was out in San Diego at a conference and I went to visit a buddy who lived there. And I was incredible guy. His name's Jeremy. He's the world blind golf champion. That's a thing. Blind golf.
Wow.
Blind series told me something. The world blind golf champion. And so I'm like, Jeremy, will you take a look at this sales page? Like, I just want to see like what's going on. He goes, dude, I can't see. And so
take a look.
Like, read it to me. And so I read it to him and I told him all the benefits, all the stuff I was going to change people's lives. And he goes, well, there's your problem. You're only charging $279. He's like, you're going to tell me you're going to change my whole life for that little?
Yeah.
He's like, are you projecting your own money beliefs onto your prospects? He's like, you need to up that. And I came home, told my wife about it. And I was like, we have to test this at a higher price point. We have to go to the $1,000 level. And she was like, but we haven't had success at this lower level. And I was like, I just got to test it. I got to try it. And I did it. And we did $50,000 in sales the following 10 days.
Whoa.
It changed our lives. And that was back in
It's so counterintuitive, right?
It is.
Raise the price, sell more.
It was crazy. Price tells a story.
It does. I mean, I look at stuff at $297 and I just figure like it's not serious.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, in that realm, in the personal development realm, I'm like, no, I need something more serious. Like if I see a product at $297 that looks interesting, I'm like, what's the next one? Yep. Like I don't want to start at the baby one. I want to go to the next one, right? I just assume 297 is their loss leader or something,
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to realize that and a big piece of this is I think what I was doing back then is I had a lot of money fears, worries, things like that. I was working on the mindset and knew I would be successful eventually, but I hadn't worked through some of those old beliefs. And I was projecting onto people. And I saw this in real time. After we had paid off debt and moved to Chicago, we have a dog. And I remember we were about to have our daughter. And I remember my dog was kind of a butthead. And so we were like, we got to get this behavior taken care of and retrain him because she's going to be grabbing at things and all that. Yeah. And so I remember seeking out, some of the best rated dog trainers in Chicago. And I saw this one dog trainer, super highly rated, but the business wasn't very big. And I wondered why that was. I was like, what's the rave reviews, all these things. So I went in and checked it out, brought my dog in. He diagnosed the dog in a matter of moments, like knew exactly what was going on, all the behaviors. And he was at the end of the consultation when he was talking about the price. And he was like, there's 3 options. The first is a do-it-yourself model where it's going to take about 6 hours a day for about 3 weeks for you to retrain your dog. That's this low ticket. I'm like, don't have time for that. Okay. He was like, the second option, it's not a good fit for you. It's a $10,000 investment, but we'll take the dog in for 2 weeks and can work with him 14 hours a day and retrain the dog. Notice the words he said. It's not a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, we also have this middle tier option that
you're like, whew.
and and
Middle tier.
middle tier. But the thing is, I was fully ready to invest whatever it took to make sure my daughter wasn't going to get bit.
Sure.
This guy was talking himself out of a sale, and I've discovered why his business was smaller
Right.
than his competitors, even though he was the best rated. And it's because in business we end up projecting
Yeah.
our own money beliefs on the prospects, and that's just another example of what I was doing back with my course sales.
I love that. I want to stay on money mindset for a minute. I'll give you a couple of stories too. There was, so back in the day, in our 20s, my wife and I owned this first aid and safety supply company, like industrial first aid products, and we'd go in and restock the first aid kits. And it was a good little company. It eventually got bought by a Fortune 500 company, but along the way, about once a year, we'd go to these, distributor conferences where everybody talks shop and you get awards for being fastest growing or whatever. And I remember this guy that I was sort of competitive with out of Minnesota, this guy, Tom. That year, he was just getting all kinds of accolades and awards. And, on one hand, I'm happy for him. On the other hand, I'm a competitive guy, right? So I remember they had this one first aid kit that was so enormous. I mean, just so enormous. It was the size of, like, I'm looking at this rack next to me. You can almost see it in my back. Oh, no, you can't. It's in the mirror. But it almost looked like a bookshelf, right, with a cabinet front on it. It was gigantic. It's just ridiculous. And that was my perception. So guess how many I sold? 0. Never sold one. Never ever offered it. Never asked about it. Never ordered. I didn't even have a sample of it. You know what I mean? Like, if someone wanted one, I definitely would have talked them out of it, right? Tom's getting all these awards. And I go, what did you do, man? And he's like, oh, those big, giant 5-shelf first aid kits. I go, yeah, that's what I lead with. Like, what do you mean that's what you lead with? He's like, I just act like that's the normal thing, and everybody seems happy with it. They're just looking for me to, tell them kind of what to do, and that's what I tell them. I'm like, that's it. No, there's no secret sauce. There's not a magic selling pill. You just start there. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, cool. So I'm going to start there. Right. And same thing in recruiting. We do recruiting. I train a lot of recruiters. I went 7 years without ever doing a search on a retained basis because I never asked to do a search on a retained basis. I was like, people won't want to do that. Everybody likes doing contingent. Everybody likes and then now 70% of our stuff is retained because that is our norm. Like, that's how to do business with us, and we're busy, and there's other people that you can work with that are contingent, right? No different than your product being $297 and then $997 and probably more now. And but I'm sure you're packing in all the value behind that. You got married around the time that we met, I think, didn't you?
Just before, yep.
Yeah.
And we got married in 2017. Yep.
Okay, cool. And you have a little girl now?
Little girl named Lillian. Yeah, she's 3 now. It's crazy how fast she's growing. It's amazing. It's
amazing. So what's next for you are you one day at a time appreciating the journey? I know you're doing that, but I mean, do you have big goals for the company, or like what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So we're in a really big growth phase right now. And one of the things that I have as a big goal is for this company to continue to scale at the level that it has, but honoring more and more time with my family. Right. And I hit this point maybe 2.5 years ago when I remember we were down in Alabama visiting family, and I was working, and my wife called me. She was like, or called me on it, and she was like, are you really working around like this rare visit we get with the family? You don't realize this, Brad, but you're a workaholic. And it was so true. I was working all the time. And it was in that moment, it kind of shifted to, I value my time more than I value dollars. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm really looking to protect now. I'm really looking to continue to grow the company at the level that it's been growing, but to truly be present each day with my wife and daughter and not miss out on those memories, and to fully be there. And we want to grow our family as well. So that's another big goal. And then from a company perspective, that's the focus. We'd love to grow our family. And then from a physical health perspective, I started taking on these crazy challenges of Spartan Ultras. Oh, wow. It's a 31-mile, 60 obstacle race. And so that's just been freaking awesome to train for. My first one's coming up in June. So anyways, those are kind of the goals going on right now.
That's crazy. And tell me a little bit about the podcast, because I know you're at least, what, 400 episodes in at this point, maybe more?
I think we're like 230,
Okay,
240 or something like that. Yeah. It's the podcast is great. I didn't know what I was doing for a really long time.
sure.
And we just recently switched to a guest model and
Okay.
like had people coming in and stuff like that. And it's been so cool to have these conversations. And so we'll keep that up for the foreseeable future. We don't notice a ton of business from the podcast, but we get a lot of incredible reviews about how it's transformed people's lives. So we're in the decision of like, do we keep this going for impact, or does it make business sense to keep this going? But for now, it's still going and growing. And so we've enjoyed filming the episodes with people. It's been seriously a really cool gift to be able to bring them to everyone.
We've had some crossover guests and been crossover guests on other shows, and it's sort of how you came back into my, we're friends on social media and all that. And then I think Anthony Schrucks, one of his podcasts, I think we were either back to back or within a couple of weeks of each other, on that show. And he's a great guy, and loved your interview with him. I re-listened to it this morning. So.
Oh, did you really? Trucks
Yep.
is a great guy. We've done some one-on-one stuff together, and he's helped me in a lot of different ways. And we've done some partnerships. He's a great guy. Love all the stuff that he stands for.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking time. It's really good to, this may sound a little corny, but I think just because I'm older than you, I like want to say it anyway. Like I'm like proud of you, man, because
Thanks, man.
when we met, I think you were like early in this journey, right? Like 2018,
Yeah.
like we were saying, and to see what you've done in the last 5 or 6 years, just incredible. Starting your family, you had just gotten married, and it's all like good stuff, right? It's not like you developed a chemical manufacturing plant. Like you're actually, helping people improve themselves. So thanks so much for being on and for the impact that you're having. Any closing words for our audience?
Yeah, I just feel called to say this right now, that whatever your goals and dreams are, no matter how long it has been that you've been attempting and going after them and putting in the work, never give up at those. You hear that as a cliche all the time, but when you start viewing your life as beautiful for what it is and appreciating and loving life as it is now and finding a way to find the beauty in the challenge, that's what allows for the success to start to happen. I think our greatest challenge is thinking we shouldn't have challenges.
Yeah.
And once we start appreciating those challenges, that's when life gets a heck of a lot easier. So never give up, keep it going, and you're meant for incredible things.
Well, and you're like living proof of that, because I mean, you're tenacity and Brad Bizjack, like next to each other in the dictionary, ought to go hand in hand. So thanks so much. Good to see you, man. Let's stay in touch.
Thanks so much, brother. Really appreciate you having me today.
You got it.